and Ernest. And they pointed out that you have to remember it isn't as simple as a victim and a villain. They pointed out that Molly and Ernest were in love. And I said, well, if Ernest was doing all this for his uncle, and he really loved Molly, and he loved the Osage culture too, and Molly loved him, and she wasn't dumb, she knew she sensed something. What is it between the two of them? And that's what eventually became the story. And that's when Leo DiCaprio pointed out to me, right after COVID, I think it was, no, right before COVID hit, right before the pandemic, he pointed out to me, he said, what if I play the other role? What if I play Ernest? And I said, well, that's interesting. I said, Ernest is the only character that's not written, which means we'd have to start the script, go in and go from the inside out, not the outside in. And so we're on the ground, boots on the ground, in that world, and it's based on love. Love, trust, betrayal. And here's the story. And so we started reworking the script, Eric and I, and then COVID hit and everything changed. I was in a room, I was working on it myself. I don't know, where were you?
Me?
Yeah. Well, you were having a good time.
Yo, beautiful, wonderful time. No, actually we started scouting in Oklahoma before the pandemic. And we were there, we're scouting the other story, the other script. And then the pandemic hit. We were ready to go back to Oklahoma to continue. And then it's like, no, we're rewriting. So then I was in a holding pattern in my home in LA.
Yeah, well, when he said the other script, that was the script based on the idea of the FBI, the Bureau of Investigation coming in. And Leo was to play what Jesse Plemons plays in the film. And I said, I don't know about that. That reminds me of Jesse is amazing. I said, but that character is a character that is based on a real man who behaved that way, didn't say anything, who just looked. He's very tough, strong man, good man, good man. I said, but I don't know what I'd be able to do with Leo with that character. And so with Ernest, I said, okay, let's create Ernest. Let's get into that. And so somehow I wound up working on it myself. A couple of friends helped every now and then. Eric helped. And then ultimately we came up with some kind of a script that I must say we felt very strongly about once we cast Lily Gladstone. We felt confident that we could do it. How to do it, we weren't quite sure. So as the film began being produced, as it was being shot, we kept changing and working and rewriting each day until the end of the shoot.
We're going to open the mic to our colleagues. Vamos con la paleta número 1, compañeros, escuchados.
Well, thank you very much, Rodrigo Prieto from Channel 22. Well, my first question would be, well, could you please tell us more about the process of how you work with the Osage people, Mr. Scorsese, please? And I would like to know, how can cinema help to magnify the voices of indigenous people?
Well, it's two questions, and I'll hit the first one. I mean, once I got to know Chief Standing Bear and Julie and Chad and so many of the others, Addie Runhorse, all that. My people who work with me, Marianne Bauer and Lisa Frechette and all of them, started working very closely with them so that what I wanted to know was more about the culture, and I wanted to actually add more rituals and more cultural behavior. I was able to get 2 baby namings in, a wedding, the funerals. In effect, I wanted to make it almost, at times, a semi-documentary on the Osage Nation and the indigenous people, and the value of who they are, the values that we may have lost, as white Europeans. I don't condemn them. I'm just saying that we certainly have a different point of view, but the value of who they are and what they believe and how they live their lives, what they think is important in terms of their values, and what is the common denominator between us and them. And so, for me, that was something. And so I really relied very, very heavily on the information that Marianne got, and that I got from Julie, that I got from She's standing there, everybody around. To the point where sometimes people would be combative in a way. There was some activist who was saying, you don't understand Osage culture. You don't understand what it is. When you're getting into this situation, you have to really, really, really be very, very careful and understand more about the people. So, for example, my grandmother used to tell me when I was a little kid, I was running around the house and all of a sudden this big storm hits. And my grandmother would say, stop, sit down, let the power of the storm pass over. And she said, because the storm is a gift from Wakanda, from God. And he said, those things you can't learn, you have to know that. So I wrote it down and I put it in the film. And I added in the scene where, where she's having this dinner with him and he's telling her things like, what color skin is that? This is my color. He said, how come you don't have a husband? She goes, well, what do you want? You want money? Yeah, sure, I want money. But I want a good time too, so does she. And so all of this, why do we admit he wants money? We admit it, Then what is the attraction? Well, there's an attraction. This is between two people, And so at that point, originally the scene was that she drank and he drank and she didn't get drunk and he did. And I said, that could be very funny. We could do all kinds of... I said, well, what's more interesting is if a storm hits and she tells him, just keep quiet, sit and don't move. And for Leo, that's very... So he tried to get the drink. She goes, stop it, stop. And I know, but I could still follow the film, And so that made it possible for us to appreciate the language. And I found the Osage language so beautiful. I mean, Leo learned it, Lily, and also Robert De Niro, who he kept adding more Osage because he wanted to do as much as, he wanted to do like the whole part in Osage. I said, you can't do it. So for me, it's something to not provoke an audience, but to encourage an audience to even deal further with the humanity of the characters. Do you really need to understand exactly what they're saying? You can tell by body language.
This is the last question. The film is an action thriller at the core. Can you speak of that genre? Do you consider this movie a classic Western?
Oh no, I couldn't. It's an odd thing. I don't know. I can never make a classic Western. The classic Western deals with a certain mythology of a culture, and there are good guys and there are bad guys, and I could never do that. I couldn't find what I could add to what Anthony Mann or John Ford or Howard Hawks or Peckinpah did. There's no way. I can't do it. He came close in the Wild Bunch, but I can never go there. So I don't consider it that. In fact, when they say this happened 100 years ago, I'm kind of shocked because I was born in 42. Because for me, 1921 is like 50 years ago. Really? When I was growing up, like the 20s were it's like the 80s now. Hey, let's do some nostalgia, the 80s, are you kidding? The 90s, nostalgia. So for me, the 20s, and they say, Marty, it's 100 years. I said, I couldn't believe it. And what he did with with his camera and what Jack Fisk and everybody did with production design, we just lived in that world for those 9-10 months, whatever it was, maybe more,
Promise, this is the last question. It's very exciting to hear you speak about, for example, when you saw your favorite films for the first time, like for Bertolucci before the Revolution, or Cartone, or Pasolini. Do you still get inspired by worldwide cinema?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yeah. Well, I show him films. Yeah, what have I showed you recently?
Couldn't pinpoint it, but you're constantemente está mirando películas, siempre. O sea, cada vez que me reúno con él en su trailer, this doesn't need subtitles either. Lo siente lo que digo. Cada vez que estamos en filmación y voy a juntarme con él para hablar de lo siguiente que vamos a filmar, hay una película todo el tiempo en su televisión. Entonces es una constante. Ese amor por el cine es una constante. Entonces, en algún momento recuerdo que hablaba de Scorsese mismo. I'll say this in English. I remember at one point you said something about cinema, the addiction to cinema being something that making movies, I'm paraphrasing, I don't know if that was it, but it was kind of a way of being able to hold it,
Yes, yeah, hold on to something that is fleeting, just like life. you'll never get it. You'll never be satisfied. It's almost like Frank Capra said it's a drug. You know, the minute you taste the drug, you've gone through it and then you want more. But that was Capra in those days. This is different. I'm trying to capture something that doesn't ultimately exist, because in order to see it, you need electricity, you need light, you need a certain... And so maybe what exists is the making of the film. And your reaction is what exists. And maybe it stays alive in your hearts and your minds, you know?
Bueno amigos, la película abre el 19.